Okay, aloha and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, especially on your lunch hour. My name is Mona Meredith. I'm the program design lead for the Hawaii Workforce Funders Collaborative. The collaborative runs an exploratory creative design space called the Hawaii Equity Lab. And we do this in collaboration with our partners. So we look forward to offering you more resources and opportunities to learn and cross-share about workforce development opportunities and initiatives that's happening in Hawaii's workforce landscape. So thank you. I'm going to introduce to you my executive director here, Matt Stevens, and he's going to tell you a little bit about our organization. And then I am going to provide a short background about our awesome presenter today, Vanessa Rogers, and then we'll hand the reins over to her and she'll move forward with the presentation. Thank you. Matt?
Thanks, Mona. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Stevens. I'm the Executive Director of the Hawaii Workforce Funders Collaborative. We're a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2021. We are a collective of 9 philanthropic foundations who have been funding different initiatives in the education and workforce space in our state. And we came together to really, create opportunities to create equitable access to good jobs for all Hawaii residents. Really, there's the easiest way to think about what we do. Really, we kind of have 2 hats. On one side, we're a learning community for philanthropy and for our partners to learn about best practices in workforce development and align our initiatives. And then the second half is our Pooled Impact Fund, where we serve as fundraisers and grant makers to test and innovate and fund programs at the cutting edge here in Hawaii that really help to create better opportunities for workers in our state. Really excited to kick off our webinar series today, and I'll turn it back over to Mona.
Thanks so much, Matt. Thank you. And it's my great honor to introduce to you our first speaker for this webinar series, Vanessa Rogers. Thank you so much for answering the call to share a little bit about the wonderful work that you do and the expertise you have in this space over the past few years. So Vanessa Rogers is the Associate Vice President for Workforce Development at the Chamber of Commerce here in Hawaii. As the Associate Vice President, she's responsible for increasing the local talent pipeline by connecting Hawaii's employers to qualified job seekers. Vanessa plays a key role in preparing and connecting our residents to the demand with family-sustaining careers and allowing Kama'aina to really thrive and grow here in Hawaii. I know Vanessa is passionate about keeping local talent here and also exploring opportunities to further have a greater impact for those who are seeking meaningful jobs here in Hawaii. Vanessa has spent her career in educational leadership, program management, staffing, and other workforce development consultancy projects. So we're really honored that she could join us today and also share a little bit about skills-based strategies and just what that's all about. So I'm going to turn the time over to Vanessa right now, and yeah, take it away. Thanks so much, Vanessa.
Thank you so much, Mona and Matt, for having me here today. And thank you all for joining this webinar. I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen as we do have some kind of visuals to help guide the presentation today. But really want this to be quite interactive. Really encourage you to add your questions or thoughts in the chat. I'll also be using a platform called Padlet that you'll have an opportunity to engage with as well as we go through the session today. So as Mona shared, my name is Vanessa Rogers. I work at the Chamber of Commerce as the Associate Vice President of Workforce Development. And I do want to invite all of you to also share a little bit about yourselves in the chat, just so we get a better sense of who's in the room today. So if you wouldn't mind just adding your name and your company and the role that you play within your company in the chat, just so we can kind of see who's with us today in this webinar. Before we jump into today's topic, which I'm really excited to dive into with all of you, as it is something I'm really passionate about after having spent a lot of time in workforce development. I think this kind of new shift to skills-based hiring is really one that can open the door for a lot of talented individuals and also really better serve the business community. So excited to engage in that conversation today. But before we do, just wanted to give you a little bit of framework for my role at the Chamber. And what the Chamber does in the education and workforce development space. So on the screen, you can see that our mission is really to strengthen Hawaii's education to workforce pipeline. And so we do this through a variety of different ways. We have 3 different pillars in our work. And the main one is really sector partnerships. So I will spend a little bit of time talking about sector partnerships if you're not familiar, because it is the forum that we use to engage sector leaders and also education partners and community partners that are committed to really developing this kindergarten to career pathway for Hawaii's residents to be skilled and trained into the jobs that are needed for Hawaii's tomorrow. So sector partnerships are industry-led, and the key in this is that they are really the industry leaders are at the table coming together to think about what are the challenges that they're facing and how can we move the needle in the direction that we want to make sure that there is a skilled workforce for the jobs that are coming. So they're looking at in-demand entry-level occupations, working with the schools to develop those career pathways and get excitement around those pathways for our students. We work a lot around like what are some additional skills training that may be needed. It could be in the K through 12 system, it could be post-secondary, it could be certification training, so lots of different skills training development. And then really working with businesses to think about how can they become co-creators of talent. So instead of just waiting for people to come that are ready to be employed by them, we really want them to have a stake in the game and say, you know, we're willing to provide some on-the-job training, or we'll host an intern, or we'll have, you know, high school students come and shadow us for the day just to get that early exposure and make sure that that folks are interested and ready to move into these careers. And then of course, offering that those entry-level employment opportunities. So I wanted to share just a little bit of like what this can actually look like. So one of the sector partnerships that we support is engineering. And so what you can see on the screen is there's a clear pathway, right? So starting all the way at kindergarten, going to career, and we have a number of different activities that can happen within that time frame. So you'll see at the beginning of that pathway, it's really about awareness and exploration. So think about like, you know, parent nights and STEM nights and engineering field days, like talking about math readiness specifically for engineering, right? And as you get into more of that high school, then you're looking at things like mock job interviews, you're looking at internships, career fair days. And then we know post-secondary can be a part of this pathway, but doesn't always have to be part of the pathway. But there again, we're looking at things like work experiences, internships to really prepare people for the careers that they're entering into. So my role at the Chamber, I am doing workforce development. So I'm really working with employers. So our call to action for employers is to really think about how they can embed themselves into this pathway. So instead of just, you know, I mean, it's great to give information about what's needed and what are the skills and the trainings that are required in order to move into these jobs, but we want them to be active participants in developing the talent that they need. And we know that it can really be mutually beneficial, both for individuals seeking employment and also for those employers looking for the right folks to fill the positions that they need. So we're going to talk a little bit about this today. And again, like I said, really want it to be an interactive session. So do feel free to, you know, raise your hand if you have a question or a comment. You can type it into the chat. I know Mona will be helping me monitor the chat. And then we also will have an opportunity to engage in an interactive screen called Padlet. As we go through this conversation, you know, I really want you to view me just as a facilitator of the conversation. I am a learner myself and a collaborator, and just excited to be here to kind of help facilitate the topic of skills-based hiring. So we've done our introductions and warm up. We're going to get into really what do we mean when we say skills-based hiring? What are some of the benefits of skills-based hiring? And then really get into some tangible actions that you can take if this is a path that you and your company would like to pursue in order to kind of open up that talent pipeline for the folks that you are looking to hire. All right, so we are going to start with our first question. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to share a different screen. Mona is going to put into the chat for us a link, and I'll ask you to just click on that link. And let me share my screen with it. So what you should see now when you click on the link is this page here. So we're going to be using this throughout today's session as a way for everyone to engage. So get ready to type some of your answers. We're going to start with the first question, which is, what is one word you would use to describe your current hiring process? So in order to engage on this platform, you're just going to hit this plus button here, and then you'll get a little text box that will pop up. You can type in whatever your answer is, and then just simply hit publish. You'll also notice that once we start seeing some folks populate their answers, you'll see you have an opportunity to like what somebody said, to add a question or a comment. So really, we can use this as an engagement tool throughout all of today's session. Also note that there are 5 questions for you here. I have embedded time throughout the presentation and the discussion today for us to go in and answer those specific questions just based on the context that has been given. But you can keep this up throughout. And if you do, have a thought and you want to add it here, please feel free to do so. The last question is just, what other questions do you have? I know that we're not going to be able to cover everything in the hour time that we have together. So as you have questions come up or you're interested in, gaining some more resources, please put them there, as I'd love to, be a partner with you and figure out how to get you some of that information if I don't already have it. All right, so seeing a couple of responses. We have extensive, time-consuming, conventional. Great. Yeah, I have felt all of those things during hiring processes myself, so I can certainly relate. And hopefully, some of what we're going to talk about today, hopefully will address some of those concerns. I mean, we know that, hiring processes, can take a lot of time on the front end to really get it right, but the return on investment you get when you end up hiring the right person for the right role that's going to lead to greater productivity for your company is really well worth that upfront time spent. Reactive. Yep, exactly. Great. All right, so yeah, feel free to just keep this screen up because we are going to come back to it throughout today's session, and we'll have an opportunity to keep kind of referencing this as we go forward. I'm going to go back to the other screen. And we're just going to watch a really short video that I think really captures kind of who we're looking to serve, or one group that we're looking to kind of serve when we are talking about skills-based hiring.
Hey, how are we doing on that new hire?
I'm having a little trouble finding qualified candidates.
What does the posting say?
Well, let's see here. Ideal candidate must have strong analytical skills, excellent time management, a growth mindset, great interpersonal communication skills, works well in teams, and must have a 4-year degree. Yeah. What if we did this?
Your perfect candidate is out there, but you may never find them. Because when you require a 4-year degree, you miss out on all the people who are skilled through alternative routes. We call them STARS. People who have learned valuable skills on the job through military service or training programs. there are millions across America, ready and able to get the job done. Imagine the talent we could tap into if we hired people for the skills they've got, not where they got them. Let's change the way we hire. Look to the stars and see what you're missing.
Awesome. So want to just pause there. Has anybody heard the term stars before? You can just come off mute and share, or use like a reaction feature. So I know, one thing, Mona and I were just talking about before we got on the session today is that, once you start kind of thinking about something, like I've been really curious about skills-based hiring for a while, and then I was familiar with this organization called Opportunity at Work. That's where that video came from, and they kind of termed this they use the term stars a lot, skilled through alternative routes. And it's interesting, once you start thinking about something, it starts popping up in like lots of aspects of your life. So I think it's something I would encourage you to take a look at Opportunity at Work. They've got a lot of really great resources around stars, and it gives you a lot of percentages where you can find them, like where they're getting a lot of their skills. So that's a really excellent website to take a look at. I think Mona's going to drop it into the chat so that you can go back to it as a resource. But some interesting data that shows over 50% of people do not actually have a degree, a 2-year or 4-year degree, and have learned their skills through alternative routes, right? And so I think when we think about like who's a traditional candidate or a non-traditional candidate, actually it is more traditional to not take that pathway, right? And so there are many people that have learned skills through a variety of different opportunities, whether it be military, through different work experience. So we want to be able to kind of tap into that talent pipeline and see if they have the skills that are needed for the jobs that you're looking to fill. So I love this quote here, like, looking at a college degree, if it's not needed for a job, not having one shouldn't be a barrier to somebody getting that job, right? So as we saw in that video, even just taking off that one requirement of a 4-year degree really opened up the door for who they would consider qualified candidates. So just something to kind of keep top of mind as we're going through this conversation today. So skills-based hiring is really a growing trend in workforce. So we can see, that 80% of companies are now utilizing skills assessments that are tailored to their specific jobs. And this is a really effective way to see if somebody's going to be a good fit coming into your position. Of course, it requires that like what are those key skills that are needed to be successful in that role. So we'll talk through like some tangible strategies in order to get to that point. Also, we hear from employers all the time that the soft skills, the people skills, are really what make a big difference in a professional environment. And so how do you test for soft skills, right? You want it to be much more than just a do I like you test, because that inherently is going to have a lot of bias. But what are some different ways that you actually can test for the skills, the soft skills, the people skills that are needed in order to be successful? And, candidates vastly prefer that they are evaluated based on their skill set instead of just their resume, right? So we know it really can be a win for everyone when we begin to make this shift. And it is a trend because it works, right? So it's not only working for individuals, but it's working for businesses as well. So this Vervo is actually an organization that has a skills-based testing platform. So it's something that can be incorporated into your hiring processes that will allow you, it's like they're using AI in order to determine what are the skills needed for that specific job, and then embedding a skills test into that hiring process. Vervo is one of many. So there are a lot of different platforms that people are now utilizing, or companies are now utilizing to do skills testing. And we'll talk through a few more as we go through the presentation today. All right. So we've talked a little bit about what are, why people are using this. We've looked at like, who our stars are, but what really are we talking about when we're thinking about skills-based hiring? So at its core, it's really just a focus on assessing candidates based on their skills rather than than kind of more conventional qualifications like a degree and their specific work experience. You really want to identify candidates that have the necessary skills to do that job, knowing that there's always going to be a ramp up period. There's always going to be some professional development opportunities for anyone that you hire. But what are those key skills? And does this person have those skills? In that, you can see a lot of different benefits of moving toward this kind of approach. So it can definitely promote diversity and inclusivity in your organization. It can make the recruitment process more efficient because when you're really crystal clear on what you're looking for, you can better target, your recruitment strategies, your interviewing strategies, and your onboarding strategies. We have seen, or companies have seen that this can actually shorten their recruitment process. It can increase their retention rates, which we know can be a challenge, right? When you get someone in that's the right fit, you really want them to stay. It can reduce your overall costs. Does anyone want to guess what the average cost of hiring someone is for a company? Put it into the chat. Average cost of hiring someone.
Could this be from any state, or are we looking at Hawaii?
This is national, the national average. This was SHRM did a report around what was the average cost of hiring. And they're taking into account, recruitment, people costs, interviewing, time. So they stated, yeah, 3,000. That's a good guess. Yeah, thanks, Nelson. 2,000. Yeah, so even higher than that. The average cost of hiring someone is $4,700. Yeah, 5,000. Right on, Stephanie. Yeah. So when you think about like companies are really investing a lot of time and money into recruiting and hiring the right people. So the more targeted you can get at what exactly you're looking for, the better off you're going to be, right? And the greater return on investment you're going to have. What about the cost of a bad hire? So you've now invested that around $5,000 to hire someone, you get them in the door, and they're not really the right fit. What do you think the average cost of a bad hire is to a company? $20,000? I was actually like really shocked by this. So then the same report that the Society of Human Resource Management put out, they said that the average cost of a bad hire can be as high as $240,000, which is wild, right? But when you think about like you've spent all that time and investment looking for the right person, you've hired them, you've onboarded them, a lot of people, it may take several months, even years to end up letting go of that person. The stress on the team, the culture, having to, then rehire someone, it's really, really expensive. So this is something that as much as we can, we really want to get right? We want to hire the right person for the right job. Because ultimately, you're looking for talent that is going to add to your business's productivity and that will then add to the profitability of their business or your organization, right? So it is a business imperative to really hire the right people for the right roles. All right, so back to our Padlet. Our next question, so now kind of thinking about all that we're talking about, how do you think skills-based hiring could benefit your organization? So we'll jump back over to our Padlet. And just go ahead and put in your thoughts here. So I see we've already got one, increased talent pool and diversity for recruitment. Absolutely. And I think important to note here too, is that when you are focusing on skills-based hiring, this does not mean that you're not going to find someone that has a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree or a master's degree, right? It's really just that we're focused on what are those key skills that are required to do the role, not so much where you learn the skills, but what are the skills and do you have those skills? And again, for anyone who might have joined us late, in order to engage, you can just hit that plus button and then you'll be able to type in your thoughts. You're welcome to also add comments to other people's thoughts. There's a kind of parking lot portion for question number 5. If there's any other questions that are coming up for you as we go through today's webinar, please feel free to add those there. I know it's a lot to cover in a short period of time, so definitely feel free to utilize this throughout today's session. Okay, so let's see what else we have here. So you're really widening the net and offering a more equitable method of bringing in new talent to your organization. Absolutely. Wider chance of getting applicants with the skills needed for the job. 100%. That one I think is so key. You know, when we limit ourselves to having, you know, some of the minimum qualifications that you'll see on a lot of job descriptions, like having a 4-year degree, you're cutting out so many people that could be the perfect fit for your company, right? You could be placing a more appropriate candidate that could more quickly perform the task because they may require less task training. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of folks that are coming out of, you know, certification programs or apprenticeship programs, or have gained experience through, you know, another kind of industry, but have really transferable skills and can hit the ground running on day one. So we want to make sure that we are widening our candidate pool enough so that we are able to access those folks. Awesome. Great. So again, you feel free to leave this up because we're going to come back to it. But I'm going to go back. Just want to be mindful of our time together. Okay. All right, so we've talked about the benefits. So let's look at, like, we're really going to get into now some tangible strategies in order to implement skills-based hiring. Because, you know, let's be honest, there are barriers to doing this as well, right? Like you are going to have to look at your recruitment and your hiring processes, your onboarding processes, and make some adjustments in order to really make this work. But again, if you can put in the investment up front, you know, I think you are going to see those rewards down the line. You know, it reminds me, I have 3 small children, and I am often reminded of, like, you know, you're putting in all this energy with little kids to, like, teach them the skills that they need to be successful in life. And it doesn't, like, happen overnight that they're able to, you know, clean their dishes and to put their laundry away and make their beds. But, you know, once they know that skill and it becomes a habit, that's going to be really rewarding for them for their whole life, and certainly for me for the next 18 years. So it's really worthwhile to kind of, like, look at these things now and think about, for that next hire, like, building in these processes that are going to help you to find the right person. So want to highlight, really, there's 5 keys. I mean, there's more than this, but like 5 key bucket areas that we want to talk about today in moving to more of a skills-based hiring approach. So the first one is you have to know what are the specific skills that you need for the job you're hiring for. So conducting a jobs analysis, a skills analysis, and creating a skills matrix for that job. That's step number 1. Number 2 is then taking that information and redefining your job descriptions and requirements. So what are you putting out there that you are having candidates submit to, right? Then we're moving into that interview process. How are you utilizing objective assessments and evaluations to determine if a candidate is the right fit for you? Conducting skills-based interviews. So we'll talk through some different strategies there. And then once they are on board, once they have joined your team, it doesn't stop there, right? You want to make sure that there's a training program for new hires, a way that you're onboarding them to make sure that they're developing in the ways that you need them to develop to be successful, not only in the role that they took, but how they're going to be able to, you know, move up and progress within your company. So there's going to be a lot of information on these slides, and I know Mona will be sending out a recap email, so you'll get this information. So I just wanted to make sure that you had the resources that you need to move forward following today's webinar. I'm not going to talk about everything on these slides, but do want to highlight a couple of key things, right? So the first one, I mean, we're talking about skills-based hiring. So obviously the number 1 thing we need to know is what are those, like, key skills, the essential skills that will make somebody successful in their role. So how do you find that out, right? So something I love that I heard someone say recently was, watch a worker. So someone who is in that role, or, is maybe a manager for that role, or whatever it is, find someone within your company that you can observe for an hour, right? Like observe them, look at the skills that they are utilizing to be successful in their role. Right. This, a lot of times what can come out of that is like, oh, I need someone who really can manage their time well. I need someone who can prioritize tasks. I need someone who can problem solve. I need someone who can, work with people who are upset or who are frustrated, right? Like someone who can de-escalate. And when I think about those kinds of essential skills that are required in a lot of jobs, I often refer to like my time working in food service and being a waiter, like that I learned so much from just being on the floor, taking orders, working with people, and really learned a lot of those kind of like time management, prioritization, problem solving, customer service, all came from my time working in restaurants. Of course I've been able to build on them as I've gone through my career, but thinking about like, what are those key skills that you need? You want to think about different ways of determining those skills as well, right? So different data collection methods. So it might be that you're observing, like this watch a worker idea. You might be conducting interviews, you might be doing surveys, really to get to what are the essential skills required for someone to be successful in this role. You're going to take that information and really boil it down to what are those key skills. Of what I often you see on job descriptions is it's like everything in the kitchen sink. And of course that's like, okay, great. Like, yes, it would be ideal if we could have a candidate who would have all of these things, but sometimes you can then kind of deprioritize what are actually the essential skills that are needed to be successful in that role. And another thing to think about is that, there are lots of studies that have been done that like women will not apply for roles if they don't feel like they meet every single qualification, which again is another way that you're limiting that talent pipeline, right? So thinking about like, what are the most important skills that are needed? And then you're also going to want to, revisit this. So once you have that job description created, it's not like we're going to use this for the next 10 years, right? You need to keep like updating it, making sure this is still valid, like has the role changed, all of those things. The next step is really, you're working on now creating a job description that is going to get you the talent that you're looking for. Couple of things to highlight here. So in addition to focusing on the core competencies, it's important how you write the description. So you want to really use like action-oriented words, talk about the metrics that somebody would be evaluated on, tie it to your company's goals, visions, mission, right? Because again, we're looking, it's a holistic approach to find the person that has the skills that's also going to be a fit, within your company. So that's the recruitment phase. So now we're moving into the interview phase. So what are some strong interview assessment or some assessment tools and interview practices that you can utilize to really assess a candidate and see if they might be the right fit? So I've listed a variety of different platforms that you can use for assessment tools. There are many out there. So I mentioned Verbo earlier, a lot of like technical skills in terms of like IT coding skills. They've got a bunch of different offerings, Codility, HackerRank. And so you're going to want to find what could be the right fit for you. And it may not be that you need to have a technical skills assessment, but certainly something to consider to be able to, really assess somebody's ability to come in and do the job. There's also a lot of behavioral assessment tools that can be really, really effective, not only in looking to see if someone's that you want to offer them the role, but once they're onboarded and you're working with them, it's so great to be able to know somebody's different like working style, like what are the things that like keep them in their comfort zone, like where are areas you might need to like push them a little bit more on. So there's a lot out there, Strengths Finders, Caliper, Pymetrics. There's many different ones that you can lean on. There are also job simulation platforms that you can utilize to really like have somebody do a trial run as part of the interview process. So it's not necessarily a test, but it may be, you know, a project that you're giving them and they have to complete in a certain time frame. So again, so you can really see what they're able to do, not just hear from in an interview what they say they can do, right? There's cognitive ability tests, there's role-specific assessments. So there's a lot of different tools that you can utilize as part of your interview process. The other side of it is like, you know, how are you setting up your interview? So you want to make sure that your company has a structured interview process where you have, you know, that you have like a preset amount of questions that you're asking the same questions to each candidate, right? So that you're able to have a pretty, you know, a fair evaluation of the candidates that you are interviewing. Really good idea to use behavioral-based interview questions so that you can get people to tell you a story about a time that they did something versus like, you know, tell me about your level of Excel, right? Like people can say, oh yeah, I'm great at Excel. Like I've been working with Excel for 10 years, right? But if you're telling me about a time that you saved money through your utilization of an Excel spreadsheet, you're going to get a much clearer picture on what this person's skills are and kind of the process that they might take to get somewhere. Depending on the role, panel interviews can be a good way to go, multiple interviews so that the candidate is getting to meet not only the hiring manager and HR person, but maybe someone they're going to be working directly with, or someone who's like assessing them more on just like their culture fit for the organization. So this is really going to depend on the role and the company that you're working with, but something to consider. And then, you know, having a fair way to evaluate somebody's performance. So potentially it's a scorecard. You have a set of evaluation criteria that you're working with. So again, that it's the same for each candidate that you are interviewing. And the last one I think is really important to note is that, you know, you want to consider the timeline it takes to hire someone, right? Not only for you, but for the candidates you're interviewing. So if you interview someone on a Monday and you don't get back to them for 2 weeks, and then you know, it takes another 2 weeks to schedule their second interview, you could lose the right person just because of the time that it's taking, right? So making sure that you have a process in place to you know, keep that person engaged, to try to move them through that interview process so that you're not losing someone that may be interviewing elsewhere as well. And then the last big portion is really around that onboarding and training plan. So we talked a little bit earlier about this idea of employers really becoming co-creators of talents and not just consumers of talent, right? So when you bring someone on, hopefully we've talked about like the cost of hiring someone and the cost of hiring the wrong person. So you want someone who's going to stay and grow within your company. So really important to do that investment in the beginning. So creating a strong onboarding plan that is customized to that person's need. They're helping kind of co-create and develop this plan with you so that they're also invested in the skills that are needed to keep them moving ahead in their career. Giving early opportunities for them to job shadow, to get into the work, to do some, you know, I always think about like whenever I've onboarded anyone, like what are some small projects that they can own immediately, right? Because people want to feel like they're contributing right away, but they may not have the full context to do larger projects, but, you know, getting something that they're able to do right away is going to help them feel like they're invested too. And then creating a culture of kind of ongoing feedback and evaluation. So making sure that there's opportunities to check in on how things are going, you know, what are those person's strengths, where are their opportunities to continue to learn, right? So just setting that as a kind of a norm from the beginning can really help a lot. And then that professional development plan, right? So making sure that you're setting those kind of clear goals and objectives based on the metrics that they'll be evaluated on, provide targeted training and resources to the individual so that they can continue to grow, encouraging that continuous learning. We know that that's going to be part of everyone's job. Like no one's job remains stagnant. So you've hired for the skills you need, but that person needs to keep growing just as you do in your role and everybody else does, right? And then just reviewing and adjusting the plans as needed, because nothing's going to stay the same. And so making sure that those are updated regularly is really going to go a long way. All right, so I'm going to pause here. I just went through a lot in terms of different kind of tangible strategies. So want to just open it up. Any questions on anything that we just discussed? Again, you can type it in the chat, or you can, feel free to just come off mute. All right, well, while you're thinking about it, we do have another Padlet question for you. So if you can return to our interactive platform. So we've talked about what it is, we've talked about the benefits. What do you think might be some challenges? So within your own workplace, if you are interested and think that this sounds like it could be something to explore, what challenge do you anticipate in making a shift to skills-based hiring within your workplace? Thanks, Mona, for sharing all the links and for asking a few questions in the chat as well. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. This is a tricky question because I was thinking, like, how do I word this on the Padlet? But I guess I'll verbalize this because these are examples I've heard in the past from, just from family and friends who have had this occur in their workplace, where it sometimes creates some sort of disruption in the workplace culture within, because then, some folks think, oh, so-and-so got hired, but I have a degree and that person doesn't, just that sort of, I don't know how I explain it, but it's not a positive thing. And then how do you address that, and how do you challenge that in an equitable way so that all your employees and staff feel welcome and can put forward their best selves when they're doing the work, that's assigned to them, or performing their duties. So I think that was like one of the major challenges I thought about when you pose this question. I don't know if anyone else has any examples or anyone else have heard that, but yeah, I see some comments coming through on the Padlet link.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point, Mona. I've experienced that a little bit myself within organizations, even from my own educational background. In a previous job, I was an academic director, and it was required in the job description that you had a master's degree, and I do not have a master's degree, but I had had worked with the organization and had moved up in that sense. And I remember having people on my team that knew I didn't have a master's degree and really felt challenged by that, and questioned like my ability to do the job. And so I know that is real. And I think there is that part around, especially if you're implementing this as something new, like really being clear on the intentionality of the organization, why you're shifting to this model. And also thinking about, that inclusivity piece. So one of the benefits is that you're, opening up your talent pipeline. You may be able to hire a more diverse set of candidates, right? And then in turn, you'll have a more diverse workplace. Doesn't necessarily mean, though, it's set up to be inclusive, right? So we also, LinkedIn did a study recently that showed 70% of people get jobs through people they know, right? And so in that, it's like you're referring people, so there may be a higher likelihood that they're going to immediately kind of like mesh with the culture within your company, because you already know them in different aspects of your life, right? So I think there is something too around, really having to then again be intentional about the culture that you are setting within your organization so that it is more inclusive, which means you have to take steps to make it more inclusive. It's not just like, now I have more diversity, great, let's just continue on status quo. So that's, yeah, thanks for lifting that. It certainly is a challenge. I see here, we've got a couple of other thoughts here. So biggest challenge for our organization is to change that old school mindset into this skills-based hiring approach. Absolutely. Yeah. And execution of the steps needed will be a challenge due to the extensive commitment of resources and commitment of the personnel required. Yeah. Thanks for lifting that as well. Even as I was like putting together the slide deck, I was like, oh God, this is it feels like a lot, right? And you don't have to do all of it, right? This is really just to give you some ideas and some resources. If it is something you want to explore, you can take it in bite-sized chunks, right? Like maybe the first step is just looking at your job description and saying like, do we actually need someone with a degree to do this job? Is that an essential requirement? And if it is, okay, then it is. But if it's not, can we take that off? That might be the first step, is just, let's just remove that one requirement. And then your next step might be, okay, well, now that we've taken off this degree requirement, are there other are there ways that we want to talk about some of those like professional skills that are required to do this job well? Or how can we change the language a bit to make it a bit more action oriented, or to tie in more of our like professional metrics and goals and our vision and our mission? Like, you might just take it in phases. So it doesn't have to be, done all at once. But I can see how daunting, it can be, right? I love this. So I'm wondering if the person who wrote about changing the old school mindset, if you'd be willing to kind of come off mute and share a little bit more about what you mean by that. And then if anybody has any ideas, because I do think that's one of the biggest things is just like helping employers to shift their mindset around what a qualified candidate looks like, what their background is, and all of that. Or even if you didn't write it, but you have thoughts, would love to invite you to come off mute and share.
And I think you're able to unmute yourselves. Yeah, you can.
Aloha, this is Titus. My Zoom says Michelle Ake, she's my boss. But I said this because the team that does do our hiring, they're kind of in this older generation. So they have this, conventional approach to hiring. Just like everyone else, they're looking at, the degrees, all the things. So I think that's just the biggest challenge, is to make that change in mindset, that we can approach it differently and, hire in a different way. But we don't always have to have to look at all those standard conventional methods.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Titus, for sharing. And, that really resonates with me. I spend a lot of my time in my role talking to employers and talking to a lot of HR people. And often when I ask them about that, it's like, oh, that we've used this job description for years and that's just always been on there, so sometimes it might just be as simple as that, is that it's like people are busy in their day-to-day lives and that they're, not reevaluating it, but it is much deeper. I know it's much deeper than that too. And so, a question I've been asking some people is like, well, what, like, if you don't think it's actually necessary that the person has a degree to be in this role, what is the degree telling you about this person? And is there a different way we can get to that information, right? And often what I'm hearing from employers is, well, I know that this person can manage their time well, that they're self-motivated, that they're able to work with other people. I'm assuming they did group projects when they were in college. They persevered through 2 years or 4 years in order to complete their degree. So that's, so okay, that's great. Those are some skills that you're assuming about a person because of their degree. is there something else that could give you that information, right? So that's where the like, you know, maybe you're being more intentional about the language you use around some of those essential skills or professional skills or soft skills that you put on that resume, or, you know, you're utilizing a behavioral assessment as part of your interview process or your screening process, even to get at like, how is this person going to show up at work, right? Or, you know, you're giving them a trial of their job before you offer the job to them, right? So you can really see the work that they produce. So I think, you know, when we can probe a little bit more on people's rationale for including it, you know, and open up that dialogue, it will likely take time, right? It's hard to shift mindsets, but you know, just kind of probing and helping people, like, for you to understand like where somebody is coming from, and then see like, okay, well, you know, is there a different approach? And could we try it with this one role, maybe, right? Like, that's a, you know, that's one route that you could potentially take. Great. Okay, so I have a few other things to share, and then just want to open it up for just a general kind of Q&A. Okay. So just want to kind of summarize some of the key takeaways from today's session. So recruit and hire stars. So again, those skilled through alternative routes. This could be these could be folks that have gone through military service, that have gone through community colleges, different training programs. Maybe they have partial college completion, or just lots of job experience, right? Like job experience that has given them transferable skills in order to meet the needs of the job that you're hiring for. Sometimes something as simple as just changing your language can help change people's mindsets, help change your mindset. You know, I was telling Mona at the beginning, before we got on the webinar today, just this idea of like non-traditional versus traditional, and really thinking about, you know, if over half of the population does not have a 4-year degree, why are we referring to people that don't as non-traditional when really they're more of the traditional pathway? So just thinking about like those kinds of things, the language we use is really important. Hire slow. You know, I think when you know the cost of hiring and the cost of making a bad hire, it really is important to invest that time up front to make sure you're communicating the right job, that you're interviewing in a way that is going to get you the ideal candidate, and onboard them in a way that's going to help them to stay and thrive within your company. And then really like moving as an employer, or, you know, someone in business, kind of moving away from being a consumer of talent and trying to find a way to be a co-creator of talent. This, I think, overall will increase your retention rate by hiring the right skills needed for the job, and then investing, you know, in that person's growth through a tailored onboarding plan and training plan that will help them to continue to progress within your company. Do want to plug that Hawaii is a recipient of a couple great federal grants right now that do allow for employers to be incentivized to hire folks that may, you know, not have a 4-year or a 2-year degree, right? And so there's a few that we at the Chamber are privileged to be working on. So we have one, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with Good Jobs Hawaii, but this is a 3-year grant that is really working within some kind of key sectors to help them develop their talent pipeline. And so there's an opportunity for free skills trainings for residents that are run through the UH Community College system, and then also placement services and ultimately looking for employment outcomes for entry-level roles. This is a really great program. It's also awesome for employers to know about it because it is free to all residents. So they have a lot of really great courses on there that you can even use for yourself or for your team for professional development opportunities. So when we think about that kind of like training plan after you've hired someone, Good Jobs Hawaii is a resource that I would encourage everybody to use. I know Mona's going to drop the link in the chat. There are actually even some spring courses that are still that haven't started yet. So there's opportunity to sign up for a spring course. Summer courses will be announced soon. They do focus on a couple of sectors, so IT, creative industries, clean energy, and healthcare, but there are some supportive courses as well around like HR. There's a lot of more kind of fundamental technical skills like Microsoft Office Suite or Google Slides, or, you know, they have things like social media marketing. So lots of really interesting courses on there. So take a look for yourself, your colleagues, or potentially as a resource for your hiring kind of pipeline. And we do work with the students that are coming out of those programs to help place them into jobs. Another major program right now is run through the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations called the Quest Dislocated Worker Grant. And this is a grant that is really beneficial for employers because it can allow you to have a fully funded paid intern for up to 6 months. So if you are thinking about hiring someone, you want to do kind of a trial run with someone, this can be a really great opportunity for you. We've had a lot of employers take advantage of this. The employer sets the rate of pay. So, you know, we have some internships that are maybe $18 an hour, all the way up to like $40 an hour, just based on what the intern is being asked to do. And it's really a great way to, you know, to talk about like seeing what somebody's capable of doing based on their skills versus their versus kind of more their degree requirements. This is an awesome opportunity to do just that. So what you can see on the screen, if you are interested, if you have some open roles right now, I'd love for you to email me and let's partner and see if there's any way that either one of these grants can support you. Again, some of the pool's candidates are coming out of these free skills training courses that are run through Good Jobs Hawaii at the University of Hawaii Community Colleges. And then the other pool of candidates are going to be those that are enrolled with the American Job Centers under that Department of Labor grant. And they're looking for roles in a variety of different fields. So we've been able to help connect a lot of employers to really great, talented people that just really are looking for that next opportunity. So please contact me. There are employer incentives ranging anywhere from $2,000 just to kind of offset the cost of your hiring, all the way up to a fully funded intern for 6 months. So really great opportunity there. So please reach out if that applies to you. And then we're going to just close with one additional Padlet question, and then I'll drop my email in the chat. And if there's any follow up, I'd love to meet with anyone regarding anything we talked about today. But we'll close out our time together with our last Padlet question, and then just open it up for just general Q&A. So if you want to go back to your Padlet screen, and I'll share mine. That last question is just, what are some short-term changes you could make within your recruitment and hiring process or practices? So again, thinking about what someone shared around, you know, it's really an extensive commitment and a lot of resources required in order to make this change. It doesn't have to be everything. So what's even like one thing that you might do to start the process of moving more to a skilled-based approach? And I know we're getting short on time. So as you're writing in Padlet, if anybody does have any questions, would love to just open it up for a general Q&A. So feel free to just come off mute or type it in the chat if you have a question.
Hi, Vanessa. I have a question.
Sure.
Do you know of any actual local companies that are doing hiring-based practice really well?
That's a great question. I don't have like a shining star example necessarily. I do think there are companies that are trying to make that switch. For example, one of the companies that we have worked a lot with within the IT sector partnership is Hawaii Tech Support. They're a managed service provider, and we were really challenged with finding entry-level roles for IT that did not require a 4-year degree. And they have been really open and actively trying to change their minimum requirements in order to open up their talent pipeline. And one thing that they're doing in partnership with a couple of other managed service providers is looking at, they've helped us to create, or University of Hawaii Community College to create a help desk certification, and they're embedding themselves and a few other MSPs into the program to provide that kind of employer support throughout the training. And then it will actually be hosting some of those students as interns with the goal of hiring them. So that, I think, is a really good example of an employer that's invested in looking at skills first, and also really kind of figuring out how they can be this co-creator of talent. So they're not waiting for someone to come along, but they're invested in like working with this certification program in order to be with the students from the beginning and hopefully be able to hire some of them.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And when that was posed, I immediately thought of like, I feel like a lot of nonprofit organizations and community networks and initiatives here in Hawaii, because they don't have those like conventional restrictions that maybe government and, I guess federal institutions have, they have sort of that power and flexibility to do that and do that well. And I think personally we might know of some examples that worked out, and I think because it's on a smaller scale and it is within those types of organizations, it'll be good to know that with the examples that they have.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mona. I mean, because Purple might we kind of act like a startup, and so it's easier for us to do these kind of things. So I agree with you.
Yeah,
For sure. Yeah.
thanks,
And
Sue.
and especially because I feel like there's a lot of conversation right now in this landscape about really trying to elevate more opportunities for our youth and the young adults here in Hawaii and just keep local talent here. So there's a lot of momentum going into that type of change in mindset and culture and trying to look at that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I see a couple of thoughts here. So in the short term, talking to HR and leadership about revisiting job descriptions or qualifications, and then developing or reanalyzing skills needed for positions, starting with one and moving on to the next. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there are some key things that you can, take action on that will help move the needle in that direction if you're interested. I know we're at time. I really want to thank everybody for your time today, for your questions and for your engagement on Padlet. It was really great to be able to talk with you all today and think about different strategies in order to implement skills-based hiring. So thank you for being here. Mona, thank you for allowing me to come on and share a little bit, and I will turn it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Vanessa. I enjoyed that. I learned so much and I continue to learn a lot from you. So thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us, especially during your lunch hour and especially before taking off for the long weekend, if you do have a long weekend. I do encourage you to look out for the recording and follow-up resources, which I'll send out in a follow-up email. Feel free to share that and promote that also within your organizations and your network. And also, if you are interested in maybe exploring and sharing about a topic that touches on workforce and that really helps elevate the worker voice here in Hawaii, please connect with me. I dropped my name in the chat along with my email, but I'll also send that in a follow-up email. We do have a few other webinar topics and themes in the pipeline, so we'll share that. And if you haven't yet, I encourage you also to look out for our website, the Hawaii Workforce Funders Collaborative, and sign up for our newsletter. You can also find us on LinkedIn and Instagram. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks, Vanessa. She also dropped in her email contact in the chat.
Thank you.
Mahalo, everyone. Thank you.